So, Craig, are you on the Virginia side or DC side or Maryland side? Where are you exactly?
Yeah, I'm on the Northern Virginia side.
Okay, all right,
So.
okay, great. That was home for me for a few years, actually.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. I lived in Tyson's Corner, Vienna, and then Falls Church before
Small world.
moving to this part of the world in 2009. Yeah. So
Now, where are you based?
I'm coming to you from New Delhi today,
Oh, wow.
New Delhi,
Awesome.
India, and then Karthika is joining us all the way from Colombo, Sri Lanka.
Wow, that's amazing. It's been, one of the things that's happened with this pandemic has been, I think, more collaboration internationally. It's been really fun to kind of see this play out. I've been on podcasts and I've been running this growth course. I have people,
Yes.
I mean, literally from all across the world, which has been fantastic. So it's actually in some ways opened up some new opportunities.
Great. So let's just let me formally kick it off.
Are you feeling good today?
I feel great.
Okay, good.
We always have to do a little bit of a barometer check with our friends in the US right now. Their stress levels are through the roof usually.
Yeah, totally. Are we rolling live with this?
Yeah, we're live now. Yep.
We're live now.
Right.
Very cool. Yeah, no, it's interesting in the States right now. We're on pins and needles with the election. So
Actually,
we'll see
the whole
what
world
happens.
on pins and
No,
needles.
sounds like you don't have to be anymore.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see this thing through the end, whatever form that takes.
Okay.
So
yeah. So let me just formally kick it off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from across the world today to another edition of Pandemic Punditry's Marketing in a Pandemic. We are delighted to have Greg Zingerlein, Chief Product Officer at Sandbox, with us today. Greg has founded 6 companies, had 2 successful exits. To his credit, he's also a renowned growth and product leader. So welcome to Pandemic Punditry, Craig.
hey, thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate you all reaching out to me.
Oh, not a problem. It's always good to have somebody with sort of your skill set and expertise on the show, especially on our mini series, Marketing in a Pandemic. So, I was curious. I think for the benefit of the audience, maybe what we should start, the place potentially we could start is to sort of. I know you've been at the intersection really of this product management and growth marketing for 10 to 15 years, correct?
Yep.
So I thought maybe it would be, you would be the best person to presumably give us a sort of a working definition of product management for our audience and also growth marketing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, and just a really quick intro about myself. Yeah, I started out early in my career as what I call a really bad software engineer. And so, meaning this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. If you could build a website, you could make money. And so my first couple of businesses were actually around doing that exact thing, where I was an engineer and I was building things and having fun and trying to get by making a living. But I was never a great software engineer. And over time, if you look at my career progression, I've moved from kind of really hard skills in engineering, computer engineering, mostly web development. And then I moved into building stuff for other people and doing that at scale. And then I realized that I liked the strategic side, which we call product management nowadays. But in the early to mid 2000s, when you were building products for people, they didn't actually want to pay for the strategy. They just wanted to hire you to build stuff. And so really, I think product management, so let's start there. Product management is the process of both looking at the strategy and the execution of building things. And so it has been around for quite a while, but I really think the discipline has really shaped in the last 10 years or so. And so I kind of spent a number of years there. And then what I realized after building, dozens and dozens and dozens of products, was that the building itself was starting to get a little bit easier. Products were getting easier to get out into the wild. And then what was really the challenge was getting customers into the door. And that's where growth comes in. So growth marketing, I define growth as really, it's pretty broad in terms of subject, areas and the expanse of what it covers. But really growth is about connecting value of the product to consumers of the products. And so obviously growth spans things like customer acquisition, but it also can get pretty deep into the product funnel and really growth teams may actually own pieces of the product as well, but usually a product manager will own that. So that's how I would look at the definition.
And a lot of this growth marketing has to do, these days, a lot to do with metrics and data and things like that. So you can actually sort of have a concrete view of where things are. Am I correct?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about the growth marketing role in particular is that it will be metrics based, and it will likely look at metrics across the entire organization. So you might be a growth person. Well, interestingly enough, at Sandbox, I started running the travel division. So we had a travel division of the company, and pretty quickly I got involved in a lot of other aspects of the business because I understood from my prior experiences how to go in and find opportunities and leverage experimentation to build new opportunities and to expand our market that way, and ultimately ended up in the product role that I'm in now. But really my time is split kind of 50-50. So yeah, it's been kind of interesting from that perspective.
Karthika, do you have any follow-up questions? Or
Yeah, I do actually. It's interesting because I think Christopher Lochhead had said, salespeople need to be marketing people and marketing people need to be salespeople. But with this whole concept of growth marketing, it sounds like marketers need to be a lot more than just sales and marketing.
They probably need product people, I guess.
So I think where the magic happens, and what you're seeing in some of the fastest growing startups out there, is that the teams have come together, meaning the marketing teams and the product teams have really started to coalesce together instead of working in factions. So oftentimes, even up until fairly recently, and this is probably still true at a lot of mid to large organizations, there's a lot of, I would say, conflict between, or siloization between, what marketing does and what product does. And I think that's a dangerous spot to be. So salespeople need to be marketing people need to be sales, product people need to be marketers, and marketers need to be product people. So you're seeing this blend in this stir happening in the market, where there's less, I would say, siloization, and the companies that can figure out how to, for example, build their product roadmap based on core inputs from customers and things like that, and also experimentation data that they're getting back from probably the growth or product team, as well as using data from sales, if you're, say, an enterprise SaaS platform, as well as through customer happiness teams and direct lines of customer support. All of those things should be feeding what you're actually working on. And I think it's getting better. But so, the earlier statement around sales being marketing being sales, it's all just starting to blend together, in my view. This is what I'm seeing happening out there.
So, and I think another sort of interesting term is sort of coming to the mix recently, and that's this concept of, product-led growth, right? So, so how would you define then what product-led growth is? And do you believe that, today's product managers need to adopt a product-led growth approach to product management, sorry?
Yeah, I do think they need to look at product-led growth. I mean, let's start again with a definition. How I would look at product-led growth would fall more traditionally in what more core growth or marketing people would call the activation funnel, or the activation loop. So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the product to work to help both onboard new customers more seamlessly, ideally through some kind of personalization. You're using the product to build additional value to connect to that user. So ideally they either buy more things or spend more time with you. It might also be leveraging the product through referral loops that are built into the product so that it grows itself. So those are all really, really positive things. And so when I talk about product-led growth, I encapsulate product-led growth inside of activation, because I think activation as a topic might be a little bit more broad and is actually industry agnostic. Whereas you're seeing product-led growth, I would say, more leveraged by SaaS platforms and SaaS companies, right? It's a little bit more of an arbitrary use case around consumer growth. And so that's why if you frame it within the context of activation, I think these are all terms, right? So every company is going to be different and there's no standard. The interesting thing with product-led growth, I think the good side of product-led growth is that companies are really getting good at understanding what customers want and building the right things to meet the needs of those customers and to really leverage these new opportunities that the product itself is opening up that you can't really get for free without using the product to drive growth. I do think that in some ways, product-led growth can be a bit reductive, meaning the obsessive focus on product-led growth in some ways challenges marketing, and it challenges sales, and it challenges, maybe some of the core principles of growth. I don't look at it in a binary format like that. What I think is that fast-growing companies who leverage product-led growth, who also leverage sales and marketing, are going to be the dominant companies. I don't think it's a case where you go 100% into product-led growth and you think that you're just going to scale your company that way. There's also the cold start problem. So product-led growth is great once you have customers. If you don't have customers, you first need to grow, which means you need to do the marketing and acquisition. And I think companies may get lazy thinking that the product is going to continuously forever grow itself. But the reality is that at some point you tap out your audience, you tap out your total addressable market, you tap out the conversion rates that you're going to get from your product, and you have to start looking at new things to do. And I think those are kind of outside of the realm of product-led growth. So I would absolutely endorse it. I love product-led growth. It's one of my favorite topics right now. It's very popular. But I would caveat it by saying, make sure that you're not getting lazy in the other parts of your business and you're doing all the work that you need to do to acquire those customers in more traditional ways and to make sure that they're connecting that value.
I'm sure that's music to Karthika's ears because we've had this discussion a couple of times between the two of us. And it's interesting, right? Because there was this whole thing in the past where, the dictum was you build it and they'll come, right? And product-led growth seems to be a version of that where it says build it better, and they'll come. But I mean, in reality, it's exactly what you said, which is, there are so many other, you can't reduce that to something very simple as, okay, if you just focus on the product, everything else will work. I mean, clearly that's not the case. So Karthik, I know you're biting at the bit to kind of ask some questions around this because this is one of your favorite subjects. So please go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, so Craig, so if a startup was in ideation right now, right? Should they be focusing on product-led growth, or when is that tipping point? When should they start focusing on this? And from everything that you're saying, and as Lavi said, it's music to our ears. It's not the channel; it's a channel that you can use.
Yeah. So I think so if you're in the idea phase, what it's time to do is actually get that idea into the wild. To start getting real feedback from real customers. And what I mean by that is, unless you're some crazy enterprise SaaS platform that is going to take 3 years to build, what I would recommend is that you start getting potential cohorts of users into the product giving you feedback, even if the product is not in a complete state. So rule number one is launch, right? I hate seeing launch plans and like this big build up to this big launch day. They almost always fail. A lot of startups think that they're going to launch on Product Hunt and they're going to go viral. What happens when you launch on Product Hunt is you get a decent spike if you do it well, and then most of the customers go away, because that's what happens every single time across every channel, right? There's no gaming the system. And so I would endorse Product Hunt, and you should do that at the right time. But when do you start thinking about product-led growth? I think you first have to think about how you're getting customers, right? So you, again, are looking at that zero start or that cold start challenge. So if you've got a handful of customers that are getting value from your product, can you leverage the product? Can you leverage these topics within product-led growth or these focus areas like personalization and onboarding, like building a pricing model based on constraints that the user hits through value in the product. So a great example of this is Miro. Study what Miro is doing from their onboarding perspective. When you look at what Miro does to onboard their customers, by the time you get through their onboarding, you built your first board on Miro. But what they did along the way is they almost forced you to invite a teammate in. So that's an example of product-led growth getting more growth. So I invite a teammate, and when I invite the teammate in, when they get through onboarding, they probably invited somebody else and they created a board. And once you have 2 boards created, you could only create 1 more, and then you bump up to their paid plan. So everything that they're doing, what sophisticated companies are doing is that they're mapping the user value to, and it might be free value that they're getting, and it's free boards, whatever your model is, like it's going to be different, to some kind of constraint. And that constraint is that tipping point between monetization and not. Okay. So, but Miro had to do stuff to get users in the door and to build awareness first, which is why I see their ads on Twitter all day long. And which is why I get remarketed from them. So they're not mutually exclusive. They're doing both things. And they actually are doing both things really well. They're doing the marketing and growth, and they're doing the product-led growth. So the time to start thinking about this stuff is probably now. But the order by which you do things and where you spend your time in the early days, there's nothing more important than getting customers in and matching value to those customers. And that might mean that your early customers are not going to get enough value because you didn't spend enough time on the product. But if you never get customers into the product in the first place, then you don't really have anything of value. So that's how I would approach it.
Perfect answer. So if you were to sort of give somebody an idea of, let's take the example of a startup, right? So we've got in this middle of this pandemic, there's a lot of companies sort of struggling to get their businesses off the ground. There's also a host of people who've been laid off or who may have been sort of pushed into starting companies of their own. New opportunities have opened in various areas. So there's a lot of startup activity going on. We have within our audience a lot of people from that community as well. So if you were a startup and you were advising them, Craig, I know you do a lot of that yourself. What would be the 3-5 things that you would say from your perspective as a growth marketer and a product guy to say, hey, make sure these 3 things or these 5 things on your sort of checklist to do. What would that advice be?
Yeah, so there's a couple layers to that. The first is how do you get your first batch of users, and that's a whole other conversation. But so some best practices there. I mean, in the early days, the cold start problem, get your friends and family to use the product because they're going to give you feedback, but they're not going to give you the harsh feedback that you need. You might spend a couple months building your personal brand within some private communities, like on Facebook groups and Reddit forums and in Slack communities, and you give value back. So you're a participant in multiple different online communities. And then when your time is up to pitch or sell something, you can do that in a lightweight way. A good example is I'm in the Product School community. I've done an AMA with Product School. I've done a bunch of events with Product School. When I post something in Product School, it gets some engagement because people there know me now, but it took a year to build some of that trust and credibility.
Right.
And so that's how you start to go about getting that initial base of customers and getting them in the door. In terms of as a startup, where do you focus in, I would say that next step of acquisition where you're really trying to get the user to do something, you really have to have a point of view. And so early on, it's hard to understand what are the steps that a user needs to go through for them to get value, and what are your goals as an organization to understand that user's doing what you want them to do. You really have to map this out almost linearly. So for example, I put a link out there in one of my private Slack communities. It's to an article on my website where I'm introducing some concept. I'm talking about this thing. I'm adding value. The reader likes it. And then I've got some calls to action over to now my personal or my company website. Maybe it brings them to a landing page that is related to that topic at hand. So for me, I'll use an example. I'll post articles on marketing and growth, and I'll put them on LinkedIn, and it'll bring people to my blog. And then on my blog, I can softly sell, because now I'm seen as somebody who knows what they're talking about when the user visits my blog. I can then softly sell these other things that I'm doing, which the first step I want people to do is sign up for my mailing list. Because if they sign up for my mailing list, or if they enroll in my free growth course, then I can send them more valuable content over time, and they get more hooked on what I'm talking about, and they become a real consumer of the content that I'm putting out there. But I've got a very strong point of view on that process. So it's like, first, get them into my top of funnel, just add value, add value, add value. I'm not really selling. And then over time, I can introduce more complex concepts, and then I can introduce things like my paid course, or in the past, I've done consulting and stuff like that. So those types of things become easier to do once you've built those relationships. But for your general startup, I think where I often see things go wrong is that there's no point of view on a web page. So meaning you might do a pretty good job getting people to your site, but then the site itself is confusing. I think there really has to be one call to action, one primary next step that you want them to do. It's sign up for free. It's sign up for my email list. It's request a demo. Don't focus on 10 different things. Really make it as easy as humanly possible for that user to do that one thing that you want them to do, because if they do that one thing, they're going to probably do more things.
So I think there was a critical point. I hope that people listening understood that you were making, and maybe I'll try to summarize this. So you spoke about adding a lot of value at top of the funnel, right? And then another sort of word that you use is over time, right? So this was not something that you said, hey, I come somewhere and the first point of view is buy something, right? This is the process. It's a journey. It's a process of cultivation, nurturing, right? As opposed to buy, right? As soon as you come.
It really is.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something that lots of companies miss. I mean, it's so in your face. It's so blatant that it turns people off, right? So you haven't taken the time.
Yeah. And look, you could be really direct about it as well when the time is right. So like, if you look at my, and I can share this after or whatever, but if you look at my main paid growth courses, the calls to action are apply or join the wait list if the program's sold out, or download the syllabus, because people already know me by the time they're getting to that page. Okay. Right. But if somebody signs up for my newsletter, or somebody hits my website and all they see is buy this program, they're gone. Right. What I find is that the users, and by the way, before I launched my courses, I had talked to over 100 founders on the Growth Mentor platform and got really, really good reviews. I got all 5 out of 5 reviews on it. I got something like 55 written reviews and testimonials from that alone. I spent a considerable amount of time just giving away free advice and really getting into the weeds with over 100 different companies. And I also was doing that on my blog, and I do that on LinkedIn, and I do that on Twitter. So I'm constantly trying to put relevant content out that is, thanks for sharing the link there, relevant content out that is not fluffy, that has a point of view, that my goal is that a user learns something from it. And after that, and if they become interested more in what I'm doing, then I can be more traditional sales focused, and I can move them through the process. But even the way I did that, so if you look at the progression of my, let's say the progression of my paid users, they either come in from a partnership, like a trusted partnership where I'm embedded in this community, in this case, the launch community, and I'm doing speaking events and doing free sessions all the time. And then there's calls to action to learn more about the thing that I just talked about. Or if you come in through my channels, you've probably been hearing from me for a while. And again, it's not a pressure thing. It's just, is there more value by going into this deeper dive than all the stuff that I'm giving away for free? It turns out, yes, there is, but you never have to go in and pay. You can always consume a bunch of stuff for free, and there's value in that stuff for free. This stuff takes time.
Absolutely. Karthika?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. So we talked a lot about startups and how startups can grow, etc., with product. If a company is 10, maybe 15 years down in their journey, how do they now suddenly build a product-led kind of culture and growth strategy if they miss the bus?
I think if you miss the bus, it's okay because this stuff is always changing. And I think if your business is working really well in your traditional sense and you don't think that there's an opportunity to really shift gears, then you might just want to hold steady for a while and let the market play out a little bit. I tend to always take a more aggressive growth approach, though. I think there's always more that you can be doing. So if you're 10 or 15 years in, one of the things that I think you need to do is ritualize reporting on key metrics that actually matter to your business. And I would break that down into 3 buckets. The first bucket is what's happening at the top of the funnel. So how many website visitors are you getting? Where are they coming from? How many clicks from paid ads are you getting? What's your SEO look like? This is all top of funnel, and you track that week over week. Is that growing? Is that not growing? Now, most companies have that. The next step, though, is what is the exact goal? I call this EPAG, endpoint acquisition goal. Every acquisition tactic that you use, regardless of channel, should have a transition point between the acquisition effort and the product effort. And so what are those things? Those might be sign up for my email list. It might be request a demo. It might be start a free trial. It might be get started free. That's a pivot point. So if you got 100 if you've got 100 visits in a day and 10 of them sign up for your free trial, your EPAG conversion rate would be 10% in that case.
Right.
So companies that are 10 or 15 years in, so you have to do that top of funnel view, and then you have to look at on a weekly basis what's happening with those cohorts. Ideally, you're tracking by cohort and you're not blending everything together. Again, that's a different discussion. But more generally, if you track top of funnel and then that middle of funnel, and then what's happening from there. So let's say you had 100 visitors come in, you had 10 sign up for your free account. And by the end of that first month, you had 2 people pay. Your full conversion rate is 2%, 100 down to 2. Your EPAG to revenue conversion rate is 20%. And you look at those metrics week over week and month over month. And what you want to do is increase those metrics. You want to drive up those conversion rates by building more value into the areas where you need to build more value. So if you look at it, again, week over week, what you're going to start to do is spot trends. So a company that's 10 or 15 years in, this is pretty easy stuff to do. I mean, it might take you a couple months to get all the data in place. You may need a data engineer to make sure the right pixels are in place and the right events are firing. It's relatively tactical stuff at that point, but pick your top of funnel, mid funnel, and bottom of funnel metric that's most important to you. Track it week over week and try to influence those metrics strategically by either running experiments or having a point of view on how you improve that by adding more value every step of the way. So I don't think it's a lost cause if you haven't done this stuff yet. In fact, I think it means there's a massive amount of potential opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. That's great advice. So, Craig, I mean, if you were, I always sort of try to bridge the gap here. I think on the technology side, especially in software, there's a lot of innovation around marketing and sales because technology companies use technology to do things that things like marketing and sales more than maybe traditional, say, FMCG companies, right?
Yep.
Are there any principles, strategies, tactics that, and I'm putting on the spot a little bit here, that come out of our industry, software and technology, that can be broadly applied or maybe relevant to, say, a company that's making a food product or a physical good of some kind? Can some of those principles, do they tide over? Do they carry over?
Yeah, I just had a session yesterday where we were doing we were looking at growth models and financial models for different startups in different industries. And so the students, it was myself and Jason Calacanis were reviewing, and the launch team were reviewing these materials. And one of the students said, hey, Craig, for your next iteration of your course, you might want to split consumer startups and B2B startups as separate paths because there's a lot of differences in business models. And my goal coming in was I look at it in terms of like industry and product agnostic. I think that there are fundamental principles like having a point of view, like understanding what metrics are most important, like measuring and tracking those metrics that are universal. And Jason actually made a really good point. He said something to the tune that the underlying growth principles, regardless of model, are the same. And so as a startup, if you're learning and let's say you're a physical good, there's stuff out there. There's a lot more material out there about growing non-physical good or non-hardware startups. It doesn't mean that you can't learn from those startups because a lot of those, it's like going back to first principles. How are you finding your first customers? Where do they get value? How do you grow additional value to them? So at least the marketing side of that and the growth side of that are fairly similar. It's just the models are really different at the end. So a consumer company is going for probably something like daily active users, monthly active users, true active users. Whereas a SaaS platform is going to go for monthly recurring revenue. You're going to look probably more closely at net recurring revenue and gross recurring revenue and more nuanced metrics like that. But the tactics, you could probably leverage many of these tactics for almost any type of business, including service businesses, but you just have to shift the metric view. So like the metrics themselves are going to be different, and some of the tactics are going to be different too. Sure. So I would say don't get discouraged if you're not finding a lot of literature out there on your particular model. You know, like a software and tech company, there might be ways to productize your service. There might be referral loops that you can build with other customers, right? You absolutely probably have testimonial-based growth that you can go after. Yep. So it's less about the product in that case than it is about the market and finding those growth opportunities within those industries. So I'm not sure if that answered the question. It was kind of long-winded.
It does. Actually, I mean, I think one of the things that people sort of, and some may be missing the bus on a little bit, is that, you know, there's a whole lot of technology that's available to our consumers now on their smartphone, right? So you have ability to connect with a whole bunch of like-minded individuals through social media. You have, you know, the ability to take pictures and do reviews and do all of those things. So if you sort of, you know, as a product led growth person in a FMCG company, you could sort of build some of that virality and self-adoption into the product by getting customers to post stuff on Instagram or put reviews or incent people to get discounts and sign up for the newsletter version of that product.
Yeah.
It's a recipe, right? So there are certain things you can do. You just have to sort of as you said correctly, do the translation, right? I mean,
yeah,
you got to see how, it's not one-to-one, but it's certainly principle to principle makes sense. Yeah.
And I think foundationally, so in my course, one of the things we do site takedowns, and I'm pretty brutal with feedback on one site in particular. I won't mention the name, but it's an enterprise SaaS platform, and there are literally 50 plus calls to action on their homepage. And now you might say, well, it doesn't really matter. They've got channel marketing channels. It actually matters because there's a chat window that pops up, and some poor chat person has to answer really basic questions that should have been answered through the website, through the product, that version of the product with their website being the product in that case, much more elegantly, much more quickly. And so again, regardless of what industry in it, you need to not be lazy about or downplay the impact of each and every interaction with the customer. If your site looks like crap and you're a hardware company, that might not be as bad as if you're a design thinking consulting company where everything needs to look great, but everything does matter. People's patience is less. There's more competition. It's easier to find competitors. consumers are getting more savvy every day. So you really have to cover all of your bases, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of consumers, Craig, did you manage to catch that Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma?
It's probably the next thing that I'm going to watch, but I haven't. I know about the topic, and it's interesting, but no, I have not seen it yet.
Okay, so because I had a related question, because I mean, part of being like obviously a product builder, growth marketer, etc., is to build kind of habit forming products, right? Like where consumers repeat certain sets of habits. So how do you then balance the whole healthy habits versus not getting them addicted?
Yeah, I think really where you see that come into play is in consumer social products. I think the good news is that there's not hundreds and hundreds of them that are at scale. The bad news is that I think that people are spending massive amounts of time and really getting, that unhealthy habit of whether it's checking email 58 times a day or the Twitter doom scrolling is terminology I'm seeing on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And it's really hard because like the networks, there's more value. The whole definition of a network effect is that more value gets created with when more people join the platform. Mm-hmm. Now, most startups are not in that space, right? Most startups do not have network effects that are social network effects. Now, maybe marketplaces have network effects, but I don't think there's too many people that are addicted to Uber that are just, riding around Uber all day because they're addicted to it, or some other marketplace like that. Maybe Robinhood, actually. Robinhood, I think, is a good example of activation gone bad. I think that they did a really good job of understanding the mechanisms to get somebody back in to check on their stock portfolio. And I use Robinhood, and I actually love the notifications. However, the scandal has come in where there's been some people that are unsavvy investors that have gotten hooked and have lost a lot of money. And I mean, there was a really tragic case of a suicide that came out from that. And so that's the dark side of the industry. Again, most of us don't have to deal with that because we're not building products like that. But the other thing that Robinhood was doing, I think, was sketchier around some of their data. So on their data side, and I'm not going to get into the details on that, and I'm still a user of it. So I think that if you're dealing with consumers and you've got a social product, you really have to be mindful of what the good value you're creating is and what the bad value you're creating is. And really, I think the next iteration of companies are going to have a way to filter out some of that bad stuff. And hopefully, if we fix the monetization problem in social networks, I mean, if you think about where most of the issues are coming in terms of like things like fake news, mm-hmm. and the polarization globally and in the United States and all this stuff, it's because the business model of these social products is an advertising model. And yes. What happens in an advertising model? The algorithms understand that the more polarizing a topic, the more clicks it's going to get and the more monetization is going to happen, which means that advertisers are happy because they can get deeper and deeper and deeper into the psyche of the consumer and more directly target them. And this is, by the way, why Facebook is hands down the best targeting platform out there. It just is, because they know everything about you. But the alternative to that would be a subscription-based model. So Substack is really starting to scale, and some of these lower cost consumption platforms that don't rely on that network effect and that social network effect to drive an advertising model, which inherently has a lot of flaws.
We're actually featuring one of the the people on the Social Dilemma on our program. So
awesome.
We'll send you the link. You should obviously watch it first, and then
I will probably get through that this weekend. Actually,
yeah. It's an amazing, it's transformative program, I must say. So, Karthika, do you have any follow-up questions? I have a few for Craig.
Yeah, I have a few, but Lavi, go ahead.
So Craig, this is sort of on a more personal nature. So how did you sort of end up, doing a lot of these startups and getting hooked on startups? I mean, what was the personal inspiration to do that?
Yeah, so I think like I've always been curious about different models and business models and different things, and I think it was really in college. So the internet was just coming out, and there was a lot of opportunity in the market and to build things and to do things in new ways. And really, as the industry was coming online, that was like this tidal wave of opportunity. And so it was kind of right place at the right time in terms of being in a spot where I was learning some of the hard skills to be able to build these things. And then I started my own agency, and then I had another agency, and then went to another agency. So I was just building sites and building products all day long. And what that led me to was the kind of obsession with, so I was always interested in the business side and then the strategy side, and then in the building side as an operator. And then as I got deeper into working with particular startups, I realized that, my strengths really lie in kind of looking at that broad vision and being able to map it down to functional areas that either at the product level or at the growth level, and to some degree at the engineering level. But I think you really need to have the hard skills to be a good engineer. And I don't really have them. So it was really that intersection of product and growth that led me to opportunities to talk to many, many different companies, because pretty much every startup is either struggling with trying to figure out why they're building something, what order do they build things, and how do they build it, and the why behind it. So I could help there. And then once all those things are built, again, it's like, how do we grow that? And so for me, it's been that kind of natural curiosity to explore different models, as well as just luck and timing in terms of being in the job market at a time when these happen to be the things that are providing opportunity, and then just kind of injecting myself in there. And I will say, like, I've really tried to learn about different industries. So I've worked in different industries. I've had to learn about different industries. I mean, prior to Sandbox, I had no idea that there even was like a military technology ecosystem. And it turns out it's pretty vibrant. And so working with a lot of different companies gave me the nuanced view of how to approach things more broadly, so that I over time gained the skills to be able to distill a lot of what I'm seeing in a lot of these different areas collectively, and start to provide frameworks and strategies and curriculums and courses and things like that to align to these larger goals. So I kind of, in some ways stumbled into it, and in other ways I just was fairly persistent about staying in finding that right balance between risk and comfort, right? And I've taken the plunge and done entrepreneurship a whole bunch, and I've been through just pretty much every up and down with that, and have tons and tons of, just highs and lows with that whole process. Most of the time it's hard, and then sometimes you kind of get lucky and things work out.
Great. Karthika?
Yeah, so speaking of your personal journey, just reminded me of a recent blog post of yours that I read, which is, around like what are some of the skill sets that growth marketers needed to have, etc. So if a company was hiring a growth marketer, what are some of the 3 things that they need to look for to say, that person is a fit?
Yeah, I think in terms of skills, if you're hiring a growth person, actually, or a product person, is that intellectual curiosity. Do they want to learn about new things? Are they willing to try new things? Are they willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work required to try to move users through a journey? And so that curiosity is one thing. Being able to be a team player is another. especially for a growth marketer, because growth marketers in an organization will still get a lot of resistance from multiple different people in the company, because what they're doing kind of inherently needs to challenge the norm. So you're running experiments, you've got a hypothesis, you're pushing things. And a good growth marketer is going to be both aggressively doing that, but also functionally acting as a leader who can share knowledge with the organization and get the buy-in for the organization. So I think that's the second thing. And I think the third thing is you have to figure out if you need somebody to go really deep in an area or somebody to go more broadly. And there's no one size fits all there, but your first growth marketer probably is going to be a little bit more of a generalist if you don't have product market fit yet, because you're going to have to try a bunch of things in a lot of different channels and run things like referrals and just do whatever it takes to kind of grow the business. But as you start to get bigger and you start to find product market fit, you're going to start to need more specialists. So you're probably going to need somebody to own SEO, for example, and be really, really good at SEO. So if you're going to hire one person, depending on the stage, you have to know if you need somebody to go really, really deep, categorically or wide. Ideally, whomever you hire, if it's an early hire, so somebody like if you like when I've gotten hired for jobs, I can go really broad. So I know a little bit about a bunch of stuff, enough to be dangerous. And then I usually can go really, really deep into product strategy. And I can go really, really deep into one or two topics within growth. So like my specialty is activation, right? So connecting value, making sure that we're running enough experiments and all that stuff. Whereas somebody else might be just the best paid acquisition person on the market. And that's what you need at that particular time. But I think that curiosity and those communication skills are absolutely a must, because most of the time things are going to not go as well as you think. And so this person needs to be able to convey the message and stay with it and be persistent and objective and be a good communicator.
So Craig, I think a lot of the interest on a growth marketer these days is based on the fact that for startups, they can't afford to hire all of these people in a marketing team, right? So this role sort of come up very similar to, I guess, to a full stack developer, right? I mean, the demand for them has gone through the roof as well.
It really has.
So the equivalent on the marketing side is a growth marketer, right? So where a startup says, okay, I got X amount of dollars, how do I make sure that I maximize that by hiring? I need an SEO person, but I need this person, I need that person, I need that person. Can I get all of them sort of in one?
Right.
It makes people like you highly marketable, as does people like Karthika, who is also one of them. So great. Thank you for explaining that and giving that advice, I think, because most of our founders would find that very, very useful. Karthika?
Just a final question, Craig. What does Craig Zingline's ideal marketing stack look like?
Oh, my marketing stack. So my ideal marketing stack, it's good attribution. So Google Tag Manager to make sure that you're tracking all events. It's either Mixpanel or Amplitude if you've got the budget to be able to fire events into these platforms, because what you can do is you can build really elegant analysis outputs through good cohort reporting and really good conversion tracking. So my ideal stack would be that. It would also be a comms platform. So we're using Intercom at Sandbox, which works really well for customer engagement. Then we're using Leanplum for our CRM. So you have to have a CRM. I'm fairly platform agnostic, so I don't really care as long as it works really well. So you have to have one of those and ideally it's event-based, right? So like, again, it comes back to the data engineering side where you've got events coming in and you can basically track the user through the process, and then you can smartly engage that user through those points of view on that activation funnel that you have. So what's the next thing you want them to do? And that's going to be personalized based on where they're at in their journey. The antithesis of that is what I do for a lot of my stuff, which is I just have this generic big drip campaign. I mean, I get really good open rates and really good click-through rates because it's all value-based content, but I could make it a lot better if I would just spend the time to like optimize each and every step and personalize it, but I haven't gotten there yet. So If you're not there, it's okay. Like I'm not there yet. We can all aspire to do greater things, and then it's probably some kind of data aggregate platform. Like if you don't have Mixpanel or Amplitude, it's probably something like Firebase plus Google Data Studio, which it's a free product. There's a lot of free products, and then on the enterprise side, you might be using something like Heap or Snowflake or Twilio just bought. Who did Twilio just buy? They bought Segment, right? So it might be Twilio and Segment where you're storing data. So you got to have that infrastructure in place. But again, in the earliest of days, Google Tag Manager, and you can report manually if you need to.
Awesome. Okay. Any questions, Bobby, in closing?
No. I think we're at the perfect timing there, 45 minutes. So, Craig, thank you again for taking time off in the middle of this election cycle that's still going on in the US. I was hoping that it would be done by the time we talk to you, but it's not.
No, it's not.
So I know, lots of sleepless nights from people watching the results coming in. So thanks a lot for sharing lots of wisdom, practical, helpful tips, and tactics and techniques. So we appreciate that. And I know we've flashed some of your courses up there and ways to sort of contact you and sign up for classes.
Awesome.
So I'm hoping that, our viewing audience, which tends to be global, but will also sort of take you up on your expertise. So all the very best, Craig. Hope to see you soon on another edition of Pandemic Punditry at some point.
I would love to do that. This was a lot of fun. You both asked really great questions, and thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.